Welcome to part 3 of our interviews with Tom Walter, Chief Culture Officer of Tasty Catering. I'm Julie of Deeper Funner Change, and my team member Karen is going to be interviewing Tom with details about his personal journey as CEO during Tasty's transformation. If you haven't yet watched part 1, we recommend starting there.
Welcome back, everybody, to another segment with Tom Walter, former CEO, now Chief Culture Officer at Tasty Catering. We've promised everybody, Tom, that we're going to get into some of the nitty-gritty details of this transformation because it took place over many, many years. This was not an overnight change. And some of the questions that came up when we presented to the leaders that were listening in were about you and your 2 brothers, the relationship among you, and how the 3 of you had to shift your relationship in this family-run business in order for the whole company to evolve. Can you just talk about that?
Yeah, I think leaders are always watched, listened to, and talked about, and I think in our company it was even heightened because I knew everybody in the company was watching the Three Stooges and the way we interacted, and we acted like stooges. And I think the problem that Tasty Catering had at that time is that the Walter brothers brought their family culture into the workplace. And there was a rebellious attitude because our family was dysfunctional, extremely dysfunctional. And because I was number 2 and Larry was number 7 and Kevin was number 11 out of the 11 children, it was predetermined that what I say goes because I'm the oldest. And at that time, my money was in the company to start the company from my other businesses that I had. And I brought my brothers in. And that dynamic wasn't working in the workplace because I was emotionally castrating my brothers. I was just giving them, they had to do what I told them to do. They were partners by name, by title, but they weren't really partners. And on the other hand, as a leader, as a top guy, I was worried because what do they think? How are they acting? How are they behaving? What's on their thoughts? How come they're not giving more into the company? Well, later on, I found out they weren't participating more because they were afraid that I would criticize them. So after we adopted the core values, the culture statement of Tasty, I just said, I'm through projecting, hypothecating, and wondering what you're thinking. It's time for you to open up your mouth, and it's time for me to shut my mouth, and we'll follow the core values. And if you have issues, just speak up. I'll listen, because I can't do this by myself. You know, the younger people have proven I'm not as good as I thought I was. So it changed from a family dynamic, the Walter family dynamic, to becoming the Tasty Catering organizational culture, from the Walter culture to the Tasty culture. And now when my brothers and I are with our family, we can see the dysfunction in our family. The 3 brothers can be at a family gathering and we can talk and with at the same level and have not a problem, but the other ones are still that structure and that hierarchy, and it's really screwed up.
Well, that's powerful stuff, family dynamics, and we all grew up in a family. We've all got them.
Yes,
How long did it take, Tom? Like, is this something that happened? Oh, Tim and Jamie approach you, the good to great councils start, you 3 of you sit in the corner and raise your hand, and then all of a sudden you're getting along better? Or did it take time?
It took about 16 months, I think, Karen, 16, 18 months of reflection. And of course, my brain is addled with age and distance between then and now, but I think it was a good year and a half of this constant evolution, and people were looking at each other and studying. As a organizational anthropologist, I was watching how people were behaving and watching their behaviors, and it took a while before their confidence came back. Their heads were up, but it took about 16 months, 16 to 18 months.
It's interesting, hey, it's one thing to think about the dynamics with you and your brothers, the big brother who put his money in, who was nice enough to bring us on board, and to whom now we have to listen. And then to take it beyond the family, because Tasty Catering is a lot more than the Walter brothers. So talk about some of the nitty-gritty moments where you were either challenged or pushed. I'm thinking about that Sherry story. By people that were not your brothers. Can you tell that story and what happened?
I can tell you, but your listeners and viewers can't have to promise they won't tell anybody about this.
Oh, no. It's totally confidential.
So we have these core values that are illustrated over my shoulder, and we put numbers in front because it's easier to confront somebody with a number.
Can you turn around and read some of the values? Because I don't know if our viewers can actually read them.
Well, the first one is that we'll always be moral, ethical, and legal. And morality changes with age, but ethics are typically all consistent. The second is treat all with respect. The third one is quality in everything we do. The fourth one is high customer service standards. The fifth one is competitiveness, a strong determination to be the best. The last two is where it gets really interesting. Number 6 is an enduring culture of individual discipline. So I have a discipline. I am responsible for something. I'm responsible for a process or a system. And number 7, freedom and responsibility within that culture of discipline means that I'm free to make decisions, but I am responsible to the organization. So we repeat these before every meeting of 5 people or more in our organization. And over time, I just repeated it for a meeting this afternoon. It just becomes ingrained in who we are. So it becomes conscious, subconscious, subliminal. It becomes an assumed behavior. So I was waiting for the first person to be violated for this, to be called out for violating the values. And one night we get these after action reports, and I'll get up in the middle of the night and have a bottle of water, and I'll sit there and I'll read what happened for those night's events. I realized that someone named Sherry had not charged for a full liquor bar. It was a $4,000 miscue. And of course, it defaults in our system. You have to put a number in. Otherwise, it defaults to 0. You have to say full charge or discount for some reason. And our crew leader said, why did that happen? Why was it a free bar? So I couldn't go back to sleep. Of course, I'm angry and I'm drinking coffee and I'm getting more and more wired with anger. And I walked in that morning, I walked over to Sherry's desk and confronted her. Not good morning, how are you? Can you tell me why you gave a free liquor bar away last night? And as I started to lose it, she said to me, is this number 2? I knew what number 2 was. Number 2 is treat all with respect. And the silence was deafening in that office. There were 14 people about in that office, and everybody stopped talking. I was the first person called out. And so immediately, because we've been programmed to do this, when you're wrong, promptly admit it and apologize sincerely. And I said, Sherry, I'm sorry. I'm wrong. I shouldn't have raised my voice. That was terrible. But can you tell me is what you did number 3, 5, and 7? Quality in what you do, strong determination to be the best, and responsibility to the company. And she smiled. She says, no, Tom, I apologize too. And that was the end of it. And that was part of the tribal stories about how we developed using the core values to solve confrontational issues.
I love it, actually, because I love that story, because I'm imagining what shifts when 14 people see their senior leader, someone that they hold in high regard.
Or disregard.
Yeah, getting held to speak for his actions.
Yeah.
But I think probably some of those moments, yeah, they would ripple out through the whole company. Huh. So I want to talk about some of the systems and the processes that had to change. I mean, there was the Good to Great Council and bringing those team members together to start to think strategically about the business. There's lots of pieces to this story. I'm interested particularly in the great game of business because lots of people at Tasty Catering said that the introduction of that also contributed to this shift. Can you just talk about it, what it is, the difference it made, and why, from your perspective, it's an important part of this story?
Sure. The great game of business was discovered by Jack Stack, who owns SRC in Springfield, Missouri, and he and Bo Burlingham wrote a book called The Great Game of Business, and then A Stake in the Outcome. And it's about gamifying business, about letting employees having open P&L statements and balance sheets. And we have it on the side of, on a wall of our operations room. It's about 14 feet high, and it's about
It's
14
huge.
feet
I saw
wide.
it.
It's huge. And everybody in the company owns, or their team or a group of them own every income and expense item on the P&L. So this allowed everybody to have complete and utter financial transparency. We had to teach financial literacy for them to understand what was involved. We played a game in the beginning. We were doing about let's say $5 million a year at that time. And we asked our employees to identify how much money my brothers and I were making. And we told them $5 million. And the average was $2.5 million. They thought my brothers and I were pocketing $800,000 plus a piece from that amount of money. And in the food industry, you're lucky if you make 5%. So we played this game and showed them with buckets of cash how much we really netted. And they were shocked to find out how much little profit there was at that time. So then we incentivized them that if we hit a certain percentage of income, cumulative profit before taxes for a quarter, they would gain an extra paycheck. And for 2 points over that mark would be 2 paychecks, and 3 points would be 3 paychecks. They became very interested in this. And we play it we have lunch every day as a family at 12:30, lock the doors, turn the phones off. 12:30 to 1, we eat this wonderful food prepared by our chefs and sit together and talk about things. But on Wednesdays at 12:49, we play the great game of business. And the interesting point about this, here's an interesting sidelight about how invested they get into these numbers. A lady named Jody, who has been with us forever, owns office supplies. And I was giving a speech, and it was the end of a month. I remember it was end of April, and I don't remember what year. But I asked her if she could get me a flash drive with 64, whatever. I'm not technology literate, but it was a powerful flash drive.
Big flash drive.
Yeah, it had all this power in it because I wanted to load all my speeches in it so I could mix and match. Anyway, she said, when do you need this by? And I says, May 5th, I'm going to be speaking out of state, and I'd like to have everything loaded there. She said, all right, I'll get it to you May 1st or 2nd. I says, no, Jody, I'd like it now so I could practice over the weekend. She says, no, I'll get it May. I said, Jody, could you get me the flash drive? She said, well, why don't you go buy it and your credit card, and I'll reimburse you in May. I said, what's the problem, Jody? And she says, I own office supplies, and I've never been over budget. And this is getting close to my budget, and I don't want to spend it. Here she's telling me she owns an expense item, and she's going to make me more profit, but I better behave and not spend that money. And at that point, I realized she gets it. There's another young man who was given auto gas, and he was marking down how much gas costs at various filling stations on the way into work. And he said, we're going to fill up our gas. This is after 4 or 5 months of quantitative and qualitative study. We're going to fill out all the vehicles, 30 plus vehicles, on Tuesday afternoons because gas is the cheapest. He saved us $35,000 the first year. And this is the benefit of something like this where it's a collaborative approach. Everybody's thinking, and the winner is everybody. And it almost becomes addictive because you want to do really well. You want to say in your area that you're doing better than anybody else. So we reward them when it's something positive. We cheer, and the executive chef leads this program. The owners have nothing to do with it. It's done by the employees for the employees. And if you don't hit your goal, there's silence. And some people said, 2 weeks in a row I gave my number and that silence is deafening. I've got to do better. And so this is what's led to us becoming even a higher performance financial company because the employees are controlling the financials.
And we all love to play games and we like to win, and they take it seriously.
And here's to the CEOs listening.
Yeah.
Since that started, nobody has ever asked me for a pay increase. Nobody. They know what they need to do to make more money. They know that if they could increase their sales, for example, the percentage of labor for sales decreases and that their sales will go up. Our salespeople are not paid by commission or salary. So CEO to CEO, it's awesome because your employees will always think you make more money than you do.
We have about 1 minute left, and so I do want to ask you just one more question. It took Tasty 7 or 8 years to make this transformation. There are a lot of stories. There's systems and processes and great game of business and good to great counsel. And I mean, there's so much to this. How long do you think it would take if people had support, if people had smart consultants and I'm saying consultants, if they had some guidelines and some templates and some advisement of how to make this kind of process their own and do it in their own way, how long do you think how long should people be thinking it takes?
I would think 24 months. 24 months or less. And The reason being, it took us a long time because this was all brand new to us. We learned as we went. We learned about all these great statements and all these great thinkers. We learned about Edgar Schein and Cotter. We learned about all this on our own. And if we would have found you or somebody of your ilk, Karen, we would have been able to do this a lot quicker. And I think a great judge of that was finding out what our employee engagement was before and monitoring as it goes along, how the employees got, but in retrospect, it just took us too long. But it was fun doing it.
Well, and I think part of the magic is that you learned your way forward together, and there's a lot of pride and a lot of wisdom. So I think it's a yes and. Each organization has to do this themselves. There's no magic wand here.
No.
And there are ways to make it easier, quicker, hopefully more efficient and more fun. So I'll tell you where we're going next in the next segment. We're going to talk about the future, your future, Tasty's future, your dreams, and what you think is possible. So thank you for this conversation, and we'll see you for another one really soon.
Thank you, ma'am.